So I was sitting in a waiting room.
What kind of waiting room? Like in a hospital or?
No, I can't remember where it was, but I was waiting for something, and I was sitting there thinking, as I do, about nothing. And thinking, well, I always tell people when I first started in the business, there was 29 wineries. I don't know where I got that number from, probably from you, so it's probably not true.
Probably the highest I can count.
So I sat there and trying to count them all.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty accurate number. I mean, it's probably 24, 25. I got to 16 and then gave up. Now I'm trying to think where that waiting room was, but how it's changed, right? I mean, how when I started working for you at Adelaide Cellars, I would drive the same drive as I drive from Talbot's Creek to here now, pretty much along.
And there was nothing.
Oakdale Vineyard. There was nothing.
Yeah.
There was no Norman Vineyard was there, but not the winery. Adelaide had just been built, and there was nothing else until Justin.
Yeah.
So it's been explosive, the growth, and even more so in the last 5 or 6 years, I guess. Wine styles changed. I mean, I remember in Adelaide days, you and I were just thrilled and happy as can be to get 90 points or 91 points in a magazine, because that was high, and we were the highest scoring guys in the area at that time.
Yeah.
But now it's
really
disappointing to get 90 points.
No.
So I guess my thought is a conversation we should have is how it's changing and whether the direction that it's going is good. And
Of course it isn't.
you know, right?
No,
I
it
know
is.
that, but for me, to you is more wine style. You know, the way wines are changing, the overbuilding. I mean, a lot of things we did at Adelaide, which at the time
Were radical?
we were being laughed at for.
Still are.
Throwing stems
Yeah.
back into grapes after we destem them.
Running
People were mocking us
unfinished
for
wine
it.
into barrels to barrel ferment reds was
Leaving red wines on lees,
Yeah.
native
Yeah.
yeasts. I mean, I tell people that our first trial was 93. We did 50-50, native and inoculated. And the next year I kind of thought we should try a little more, and you just said, that's it. We're done with that stuff. It's just sawdust. And so since that vintage, since 94, I've inoculated basically nothing.
the same likewise. And it has the interesting thing from the standpoint of the prestige, if you will, of the area. I recall, I think it was a 1982 Adelaide Cabernet Sauvignon. In those days, we'd send off everything to every possible competition there ever was, because you were selling. We didn't have a tasting room. Nobody would drive back in these hills. You know, it was just farmland. So sales were fundamentally based on going around to wine shops, restaurants, etc., and then with Bob Haas and Vineyard Brands going around the country. But in order to help your sales, you had to get good reviews. So we'd send off to the wine competitions.
You thought you had to get
Yeah, we thought we did. And we'd send off to the magazines, Wine Spectator, Wines and Vines in those days even, and several others. And I remember being totally, I don't know if I was upset or just bemused and ultimately happy. We're sitting there in an issue of the Wine Spectator. In those days it was in the newspaper format, it wasn't the glossy, and it had across.
I wasn't born then, actually.
Yeah, you weren't there. It had heavy metal winners. It was a listing of the top wineries of the year in terms of the awards won, and that Cabernet had gotten something like 6 golds and 8 silvers or something like that, and it was number 2 or some such. With how they used to do those point things. And then in the back of that same issue, there was a rating of Paso Robles Cabernets, and they gave it a 78 or something, and they called it a backyard barbecue wine, you know, and you just had a sense that there was nothing you could do. Go up to San Francisco, the only double gold for a Cabernet at the San Francisco Fair, whatever it was, a competition, and I'd go into the store and I'd say, would you try the Cabernet? It's, it won the double gold at your fair, and we'd like to try it. It's Paso Robles. Oh, it's too vegetal. I wouldn't even want to taste it. You know, so it was really, really difficult. And there was a lot of justification, I think, for a lot of it.
And that's been the case until recent times. Yeah. I mean, the promotion of Paso Robles has been a long road, and lots of people, Gary Everly, yourself, Volk, all of us. And until recently, it's only just really come around to be, so now we're front page of the wine, well, you and I aren't, but someone's front page of the Wine Spectator. someone better looking than two of us.
Yeah, so doesn't take much to be there.
So it's changed immensely, and it's good in lots of ways, bad in other ways. You know, I get a lot of questions in the moments that I get snared in the tasting room when I'm trying to sneak a glass of cider. And consumers like to ask, it seems to me, particularly consumers from cities that are coming here, so is it going to turn into Napa Valley? And I guess the answer is yes. Ultimately it will. But
for me, it remains more Sonoma.
You'll be dead.
Yeah,
I'll
well,
be
of course.
dead,
Well, but with any
God
luck,
knows.
yes. And we'll have to talk about the bankers who are lending me money at this age to build something, by the way. But it reminds me more of Sonoma in the sense
stupid.
They are stupid, you know, when you get right down to it. When you have such a large area, that one of the glories of Napa, and it's also its pain, if you will, is that beautiful, very narrow valley. And it becomes so congested as a consequence. You go over to Sonoma and it's more spread out. It is spread out.
I think people are more about the attitude, though. About you're never going to see a winemaker in the tasting room up there. And I'm not getting down on up there. I mean, they've done their thing. We're doing ours. But people are refreshed to come here, and you may go to Le Cuvier and find John Munch. I mean, sure as hell you won't be working, but you may find him in there.
I'm always working. I'm the one washing the glasses.
And people seem to like that. And it's got to change, and it will, I suppose. But
it could. But as I look at it, I really think that what's going on in the area with the wines and the second and third and fourth generation of vineyards, where, if you'll recall, the only thing you could plant in those days was UC David's Clone 3 or 4 or whatever they were. And if you wanted a rootstock, when we planted the Viking Ranch at Adelaida, it was a 110R. That was the only thing available. And there were really no selections, these wonderful selections that have come from Europe. There were also the moving away from what I call grape farmers to wine growers, where there are people that are as crazed and anal, Dave Osgood is a good example, about what's happening in the vineyard as we are. And that results in, we're seeing that really come to play, I think, in, is it the best? No, but it's really unique. Some very special things are happening that weren't happening in the past. And a lot of what to me are these young winemakers who are only 40, you know, I think they're really doing some fabulous stuff. They're able to, it just seems like they're much more experimental, because I do believe that we were, by and large, constipated by what we were told we could or could not do in making wine. You know, I think you got that same kind. Well, you did not have an enology degree, therefore you cannot possibly make wine.
I was told that.
I was told that any number of times.
You will never be a winemaker because you don't have a degree.
And of course, the fact of the matter is, by being ignorant, we were able to do all
Probably,
kinds of things.
probably right.
Yeah, right.
He forgot the good part.
I forgot the good part. But that is what's changed dramatically. So many of the winemakers that you see if you will, that younger generation, are not coming at it from the standpoint of the formal education. They're really coming at it with a passion.
I hope so.
Yeah. So.
You brought up David Osgood, and I think that's another great new avenue that seems to be opening up at the moment. That is old, local, not that David's old, but experienced local farmers who know the land here and know the climate here, who are moving from their traditional crops of walnuts and almonds and barley, etc., almonds, into planting grapes. And, you know, the whole winemaker in the vineyard thing is great, and we should be to a point. But if I can have David Bailey, David Osgood, these guys, they're farmers. I'm not a farmer, and nor are you, for goodness sake. So you've got someone that can grow like that. And those guys getting into our business, and that's where I'm going now more and more to source fruit, is guys that know how to farm the area. I mean, God knows, if only Alan could farm and wanted to farm grapes, that would be a great resource too.
Oh, yeah.
But those people, the Heatons, I mean, there's more and more of those. The Dodds I bought behind you is the Dodd
You were telling me about that.
Yeah. Just beautiful. And you go up there and they're not asking me, how do you think I should farm this? They're asking me, how do you want to get this? You know, and that's because they know how to farm. I don't know how to farm. And part of my thing is, a lot of the young winemaker guys are going into vineyards telling people what to do. And I'm looking at them going, oh, how are you telling David Bailey had a farm, a vineyard.
I do.
And you
think
know
that-
what you want, and you should tell him that. But
I
he
think
knows
what-
how to get there better than you do.
I agree, but I do think that so much has in the past though has been the other kind of grower, where you would have to really keep an eye on the vineyard.
But
and
you
what was
can't
going
buy
on.
from that guy.
And you can't buy from
You
that guy.
can't buy from
No.
that guy. It's the bottom line.
But the attitude then became, oh, I have to be the boss and tell the grower what to do. But this past year, Dave Osgood, I'm getting Petit Syrah from Dave, and the weather's changing.
But
the
that
weather's
fight
gonna-
never works.
Well-
I've always related it to the difference, like in a restaurant situation,
Yeah.
which is where I grew up, where the front of house fighting with the back of house,
Yeah.
which is a somewhat unfortunately an accepted thing, is that the waiters and the cooks fight.
Well, normally you
It-
see that
it-
the vineyard, even if it's
It
owned
never
by the
works.
same people, they
it
fight,
doesn't
yeah.
work. The vineyard and the wine making
Yeah.
team have to work, which, as you know, working with these with
Well,
the
this is with the
Oscars,
thing
et
with,
cetera.
with Dave. He was the one telling me the fruit's not ready, and I'm telling him you got to get it off the vine.
Yeah, but with Dave, you got to be careful because he does have a bit of a sweet tooth.
Well, that's true. But ultimately what happened is the weather did hit. He calls me up and he says, there's not a grape for you on the Petite. He lost his entire Petite crop by being insistent on the quality level he wanted.
Right.
Uh,
And these guys are picking too. I mean, I spoke to Bailey yesterday, and I was talking about the Zin of Steel that we just released this last weekend, and he's curious how it went. And his curiosity was, I'm curious because I didn't tell you this at the time, but I picked that from every block of the entire vineyard to get you those numbers you were looking for. Which, I mean, for me, that's who I have to work for because I have a day job and I can't go to the vineyard every day, but beside that,
There are
that's who I
vineyards you
want-
don't
that's
have
who
to
I
go
want
to.
it. That's
Yeah. You
who
don't
I
have to
want
go.
to work
That's-
with, you know? So they know what you're looking for and they know how to achieve it and they can go vine to vine and go, that one, that one.
So I tell Dave Bailey that he has late crop. This is several years ago. I'm going to make a late harvest because the last late harvest, which happened to be a regular wine that didn't finish fermenting, as I tell people, put it in a small bottle and charge more. But I wanted to actually make a late harvest. So we get fruit in from Dave Bailey that's this kind of dusty black, how the Zin can be. And it's not that high. It's around 30, 31 bricks, which would be a really up there. But you also know it's got a lot of raisin, so it's going to soak up. And the hydrometer doesn't go that high.
Right.
So
It's like sitting on top.
Sitting on top, floating. So you can't even tell what the sugar is. And I thought, okay, this thing is going to stop at about 8% sugar, at 17, 18% alcohol, and it's going to be some kind of weird but interesting late harvest. It shoots right on through. We have no idea what the alcohol got to.
21 and a half.
It was over what it can happen. Literally, when you pour it in a glass, it would try to climb out. You'd see the legs like they do on cognac climbing the glass. It's just outrageous. It wasn't a late harvest. Ultimately, it became core to our regular wine blend. It was a little bit high, but that's how life is. We like it when it gets that way. When are we going to open the whiskey?
We're on a road to nowhere. Oh, come on inside. Taking that